Our next task is to draw random sized squares around the screen. And this is a good place where we can build a function. Okay, so let's go ahead and use this for loop that we have here to draw a square. And so we'll do that by taking off these things, and we will take away the radius. We don't need that. But we do need to move forward and turn left 90 degrees and repeat that 4 times. I'm going through this quickly because we've already done this in a past assignment. Right? So if I go ahead and run that, then I can show you we have a square there, right? And it has sides of size 20 or 20 pixels. And so we want to draw multiple all around the screen. Okay, so how do we get that done? Draw 10 squares of random size using a for loop. So we're going to need to create a size variable, right, or a side variable. So maybe we could say side length is equal to 20, right? And instead of putting 20 in here, we're going to use side length. Okay. So I go ahead and run that, and you can see our square is drawn exactly the way it was, because when it gets to this command, it's going to look for the variable side length and find the value of 20 inside of it and move forward 20. But if I want these rectangles to be different sizes, right, then I would need to, well, actually, I guess the first step would be to draw different rectangles, right? So this here draws one rectangle, and I guess we can go ahead and make a function for it. And the closest thing that I guess we have talked about is back in Scratch when we had a make block, right? And we made a block and we put commands underneath it. Well, this is basically what's happening over here. We're going to make a function, right? So we'll come up here and we will say function, or I'm sorry, def, right? It's definition, and we can call it square. And let's take in side length as our argument, is what we call it. And we're just going to go ahead and do this. Okay, and instead of side length, we're going to say length. And now down here, we would call that function. And the way that you call it is you just say, what's the name of the function? Square. And we need to pass it the length. So we pass it side underscore length. Okay. So what's going to happen here? How does this program run? Well, it's going to start by importing the turtle. It's going to start by creating the screen, making the turtle, and having the side length variable equal to 20. It's going to ignore the definition. Right? It's just going to look at it and say, okay, good, I have a definition named square, and it's going to come down here, and here's where we're going to run square. So it's going to look for a function called square, and it's going to pass it the value that's contained inside length. It's going to pass it the 20. So it's going to jump up to here to 12, and length is going to be the temporary variable for this function. It only exists in this function, that's it, and it's going to be equal to 20. And then it's going to come into the for loop, and it's going to draw that square of side length 20. Once this finishes, the for loop finishes, and the function finishes, then the program's going to jump back to line 17 and then wait for the exit on click. So let's go ahead and run that. Alright, and now when I click on it, it's done. Okay, great. But here I don't want to make just one square, I want to make many squares. Right? So what I can do is put a for loop around this. Right? And so since I used I in the other for loop, I'm going to use j here. And I'm going to say for j in range. And let's do 25. And we're going to do 25 squares of side length. Right? But if I run that, you're going to see that it's all the same because they're all on top of each other, right? And the turtle's just running in circles. But we want to make them all different side lengths. So how can we do that? What you can do is before you run the for loop, you can reset the side length variable. So I'm going to say side underscore length is equal to rand range, and let's get a lower bound of 20 and an upper bound of 100. And now when it runs and it makes 25 different squares, it's going to be given a side length is going to be set to a random number between 20 and 100, and then we're going to draw that. Oh, I'm sorry, this needs to go inside of the for loop. And it needs to go inside of the for loop because every square that we draw needs to have a new random side length. Right? So let's go ahead and run that. Ooh, rand range. I guess we need to import random then, right? So let's come up to the top and import random, and now rand range is going to work. Ooh, maybe random is capital. Run that. Why is rand range not working? Let's go ahead and run that. Rand range is not defined. Let's come over here and let's put turtle rand range. Oh, okay, so I need to put random dot rand range. Okay, so let's come back here to Pygame and let's say random dot rand range. In order for this to work, and I hit play, random is not defined. Now I need to come up and I need to import random, right? Okay, and so now let's go ahead and play this. Okay, so now you can see that there are different squares of there's 25 squares that are being drawn, and they all have different side lengths. Okay, and why is that? Well, because in our for loop that runs 25 times, before we draw our square, we are calculating a random side length that we pass to the square function that's going to draw that square. So let's say the first time it picks a random number of 30, and we draw the square of side length 30, and then it comes back here to the for loop that comes into, it repeats itself, it iterates, and it picks a random number of 50, and we draw a square of side length 50, and so on. So every square is going to have its own side length. And maybe if I change this to 300, it might become a little bit more obvious what's happening. Right? So here's the first one, really big. Here's another random number, and another random number. So we have all these different squares of different sizes.